There is a growing number of wild predators in Washington and a growing impact on the people who live here. Thank you for joining us here for this KREM 2 Apex Predator Special. I'm Whitney Ward. The inland Northwest is home to wolves, cougars, and bears. And over the last decade, they have killed hundreds of livestock here in eastern Washington. But out of all the wildlife in our state, nothing is more controversial or more polarizing than Washington wolves. It has been more than 10 years since wolves have once again become part of the Washington landscape. Many believe they were intentionally brought back as part of a conservation effort, but the Department of Fish and Wildlife says they began colonizing all on their own, coming in from Canada and Idaho, forming packs here in eastern Washington. And every year their population is growing. Today there are at least 43 known active wolf packs, with the majority of them here in northeast Washington, mostly near our more rural communities, which are also home to dozens of our state's cattle producers. And over the years, many of them have told me how the growing wolf population is eating into their bottom line, and they say state leaders simply are not fixing the problem.
I did not bring any apples. We didn't.
Kathy McKay is the lifelong owner of K Diamond K Guest Ranch in Republic. Built by her parents, she has spent her life continuing the family legacy and passing it on to others.
We feed 2 tons of hay a day.
But as she showed me around her 1,700-acre property, she says the growing wolf population right in her own backyard makes her wonder about the future.
We're the ones going extinct.
Kathy tells me she has known wolf packs on all sides.
This is where they're killing the most. We have our cattle currently just down in that field.
How many packs are up here? Do you know?
I know of about 5 packs that are within 25 miles of us.
That hasn't always been the case. She says it's only been in the last 5 to 7 years that the wolves have truly emerged as her #1 threat. Kathy tells me she's lost more than 100 animals here at the ranch over the last decade. At first, it was maybe 1 or 2 each year, but this year alone, it's already been 20. She says the problem clearly is not getting better, it's getting worse. But wolves are not the only predator out there. This map from Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife shows reported sightings of the state's wolves, cougars, and even grizzly bears. Cougar sightings are the most frequent statewide. It's estimated there are about 2,500 adult cougars in the state, and there are thousands of reports every year and occasionally attacks on people, like this one near Snoqualmie Pass earlier this year, or this one in Stevens County in 2022 that seriously injured a little girl.
How scary it must have been for them.
WDFW data shows 247 depredation incidents involving cougars, killing or injuring mostly smaller animals like goats and sheep. 1 in 3 attacks happening in these 4 counties. Grizzlies are reported far less often, but they are in Washington. This same map shows a handful of sightings just this year. And while they are a protected species in Washington, they are managed at the federal level by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and their numbers in Washington are minimal, only a few dozen that roam between the U.S.-Canada border in the Selkirk Mountains and a handful in the North Cascades. But the plan to bring grizzlies back also worries a lot of people here in eastern Washington, saying they will only add to the wolf problem. This grizzly was spotted on camera numerous times in Stevens County, killing one family's chickens.
Grizzly bears, they just don't stop. Once they find something that they want, you don't just chase them off.
But wolves are what's spotted most regularly in Ferry, Stevens, and Pend Oreille counties, and I have covered their continued conflict with ranchers here for almost 10 years. More than half of the state's 42 documented packs are in this small remote corner of the state, at least 260 total wolves and 36 known attacks on cattle. But law enforcement here says those official numbers are just a fraction of reality.
Some of the ranchers here aren't reporting anymore because contacting us, contacting the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they have given up on us coming up with solutions.
Ray Maycumber has been the sheriff of Ferry County for the last decade. He is now one of 16 eastern Washington sheriffs who have formed a coalition providing testimony to the Fish and Wildlife Commission about serious concerns for public safety.
You've got bus stops out in the rural areas that overlap with known wolf territory. They're being seen all over the place, even in backyards.
He says ranchers and property owners like Kathy have lost faith in the state's ability or willingness to manage Washington's wolves in a way that works for everyone.
We keep following a plan that isn't working.
What would your message be to incoming state leaders?
Be sure to listen to everyone.
I took those concerns to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to ask what would it take to change how Washington manages its wolves.
What does it tell you as a department that so many people don't want to report, that so many people don't feel that it makes a difference?
It is a little discouraging because we also rely on that data to know what's going on out there. Our numbers differ a lot then from what we're hearing.
What about the idea of relocating some of them out of that northeast corner into kind of the southwest where they're not yet, fully established, just to balance things out and kind of ease the burden?
The research on translocation shows that generally animals don't survive or they just return where they came from. So what we could do, revisit the gray wolf conservation and management plan. We could open that up and rediscuss it. But again, that's something that would have to come at the direction of either the Fish and Wildlife Commission or a request from the Wolf Advisory Group.
She says so far that hasn't happened, so until then, both sides will have to make some sacrifice. Back here at K Diamond K, Kathy says the sacrifice has been one-sided.
There's people 300 miles away making decisions for our livelihood. I feel like we're preaching on deaf ears.
She worries even if there is a change, it may be too little and too late.
We as humans, I feel, have been put here to manage the land. Our whole life, we helped animals, and they can't speak, they can't talk, so they are all relying on me to protect them.
And this is far from the first time that we have covered wolf troubles in eastern and central Washington. Almost always it is problems between the wolves and other animals. But every once in a while they do interact with people. Back in 2018, we covered a shocking story about a young grad student who was working on a research project deep in the backwoods of Okanogan County when she came face to face with a pack of wolves.
And the call came to us, said that she was 30 feet up a tree surrounded by a pack of wolves. Sent in a DNR helicopter. When he flew into the area, he did radio that there were wolves on the ground.
He could see them.
He could see them on the ground.
And our concern is the public safety. And so they recreate in this area. They hike, they fish, they camp.
And crews will come up and do trail maintenance here, but you can obviously clearly see that by the fresh cut log there out of the trail.
So another indication that there are lots of people in this
Correct,
area.
yeah.
Do you think it would change things for people in this area to know that there are wolves here?
Yeah, I do. It changes a lot. People no longer feel safe coming out recreating, doing what people love to do.
We have wolves, and they are federally protected, so we don't know anything about them. They tell you these are the numbers, but we are blacked out, so we don't know where they're at. We don't know how many, we don't know where the packs are.
We'll be looking for tracks, we'll be looking for dens, we'll be looking for where the event happened. We have the GPS coordinates, so we'll go to that exact location and try to match up what we know now with the evidence that's out there.
I don't want this to become the norm, where people are running into wolves or a pack of wolves, because things can go bad real quick.
What would be normal predators here?
Normal predators would be just your coyote and your cougar, really, and that's it. We've got some black bears up here, but they're not a huge concern. They're a predator, and they're going to follow the deer wherever they go.
The trail's relatively easy to get onto, so in theory, anybody could really get back to the area where this young woman was, right?
Absolutely. Looking at this trail, it's my opinion that this is a well-used trail by hikers and/or hunters.
As someone who recreates in this area, is that something that you feel you should know when you come out into an area like this, that there is kind of that apex predator here?
Absolutely. I think that would definitely be good to know when you come out to an area that there's a species of animal out here that's not native to this area. I don't want to be taken off guard, and I don't want other people to be taken off guard either. I think they should be carrying the proper protection, whether that be a sidearm or whether that be pepper spray, and knowing what they may face when they go into the woods.
It sounded like she had her sat phone, she knew what to do.
Not everyone, though, would be maybe so prepared if they're just going out for a day hike.
Right. Is this something we should just tell everybody, hey, stay out of this area for now? Or, wolves aren't running around, it's not like the movie where they're not running around, hunting down people. But they're an animal. All we're trying to do is just make sure everybody's safe.
So we now know those wolves are from the Loop Loop pack, and there are a confirmed at least 6 to 8 wolves within this pack. This is a Washington Fish and Wildlife map that shows their known territory. However, we also know the woman ran into them up here beyond this red circle. So that means their territory, to some extent, is changing. Now, this is an extremely remote area. If you take a look, this is the area where she encountered those wolves. It is well known, heavily used by campers, hikers, and hunters. The good thing is, of course, the woman was safely rescued. However, we were initially told that it took about 14 minutes to get to her. We now know that is not exactly how it happened. In fact, there was actually a great deal of confusion as far as Okanogan County rescuers trying to launch a rescue operation to go get her, but being met with resistance from the state. And as a result, that young woman stayed up in a tree for over an hour. Take a listen.
So did Fish and Wildlife have anybody to go? Yeah, they said they have an agent in service up there. They're not exactly sure where he's at, but he is in service in Okanogan County. Okay, good. Okay. And he's supposed to call me back. Talking to the Forest Service, it's not a Forest Service individual at all. This is actually a search and rescue operation. Okay. So I guess we're requesting Okanogan County Search and Rescue to go rescue her.
Okay, I don't know that they're able to do that because of a pack of wolves.
But what I'm being told is, although she's not actually lost, it is a rescue, and it would be fallen under Okanogan County.
Okay, and who was it that told you that?
The Forest Service. And when I talked to Fish and Wildlife, they said, nope, that's not search and rescue, that's just us, and no helicopter. But,
for goodness sake, somebody needs to figure it out.
And I'm like, I don't know how long this girl can hang in this tree. Seriously.
I know.
She's feet up hanging.
Sake.
Now, on multiple occasions, search and rescue crews were told by State Fish and Wildlife to stand down. These dispatch documents show how the WDFW repeatedly told the county not to launch a helicopter, saying the wolves are a federally listed species. Dispatchers responded to that, saying they were more concerned for the woman's life than the listed animal. Fish and Wildlife officials then responded by saying the woman was safe up in the tree and that the wolves are doing what they're supposed to do, at one point asking what she was doing there this time of year since it was a known den. And I want to take a second to stop right there because it shows that Fish and Wildlife not only knew the wolves were there, but they also knew there was a den. We also know that wolves will act more aggressively if they are protecting their food sources or their pups in and around the den. So now many are saying if Fish and Wildlife knew, why were Okanogan authorities also not informed? Now keep in mind that young woman was still up in the tree at this point. The dispatcher said they didn't know how safe she was though, how strong the tree was, if the limbs would even hold her or how much longer she could hold on. Again, the county rescuers said they had launch approval from the Forest Service and questioned why WDFW was trying to keep them out of the area. In the end, it was a DNR helicopter that landed and flew the woman to safety. But despite the growing pleas from ranchers and law enforcement, there has been a strong conservationist movement to protect the wolves, both at the federal and at the state level. And that is why ranchers here in Washington tell me their hands are tied.
So we first found elk, it was down on that ridge down there.
This is part of the land that Ron Eslick and his family have been grazing their cattle now for about 30 years. It's a combination of state and federal land, about 13,000 acres. Right now we are standing in what is considered the Togo Pack territory. Ron tells me that his family has been grazing cattle here for more than 3 decades and have had very few problems, but that's all started to change just in the last few years.
When the wolf gets a hunger pain, he's going to fill it.
Raising cattle in Ferry County has never been easy. So how long has your family been up here on this land?
Since 47.
But for Ron Eslick, it's never been harder than right now.
The day that their wolf killed that calf over there, all my cows was right here in a tight circle right here.
He tells me he's lost 3 calves just this year to wolf attacks.
And that was all scuffed up there where she's fighting it off.
In May, it was a weeks-old calf killed right along the fence line near his property outside of Kettle Falls. Just 7 miles south of the Canadian border, he is deep in Washington wolf country.
They might be even watching us from right up here.
There are 22 confirmed packs in the state, about 120 wolves, nearly half of them right here in Ferry County, where many ranchers have been grazing cattle for generations. What does it mean for you business-wise when you lose a calf like that?
$1,400.
Does it? Why turn them out here?
Well, why turn them out here?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing to do.
It's the thing to do. But would it be safer if they were in a pasture?
Yeah, but then that's more expensive, and without the wolves, you didn't have to worry about it.
But now he does worry about it, and so do dozens of other livestock producers who typically turn their cattle out in the spring to roam free on huge, densely forested grazing allotments from the U.S. Forest Service.
So how many cows do you still have out there today, do you think?
I should have a dozen out there.
The problem is, in deep woods like these, cows tend to scatter, making it harder for them to cluster together and protect themselves from wolves.
Could they be anywhere on any of these peaks around us?
Yes, that Togo pack could go clear down to Big Bowl.
On this day, Ron let me ride along as he checked on his herd. But over 13,000 acres, we only found tracks, not a single cow. Weeks later, he tells me they all came in except one, another loss he attributes to wolves.
What do you say to the people who say, what do you expect these wolves to do? Because we're out in their territory.
Well, what I say to them is they don't know the situation. They don't know what's going on here. I seen their tracks.
He tells me what's going on is the wolves are thriving, while small family-run cattle operations like his are going extinct. And somewhere in these woods, gray wolves and cows are trying to coexist, but only one is a protected species under the active management of Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife.
And you guys are often seen as just anti-wolf, right?
Yeah.
You just want to kill them all, right?
Yeah.
And is that necessarily the case?
No, that's not really the case. Because we didn't ask for them to come in. We didn't want them to come in, but what do you do?
Do you think that there's a place for them in this area?
No.
No?
No.
But they're already here, so now what?
Yeah, we just got to put up with it, don't we? We got to change our ways, probably.
And for Ron, he's already changed. Next year, he's planning to sell the majority of his cows, and for the few that he keeps, he'll graze them off of the range, away from the wolves.
She got a droopy ear, and I was going to sell her.
He says right now it's the only way in Ferry County to have both.
I think we'll all survive.
Yeah. The wolves too?
Yeah, they will too, definitely.
He just doesn't know at what cost.
So while it's clear that the current system is not working for ranchers like Ron Eslick, the other side of this wolf issue is from environmentalists who say it's not working for the wolves either. And that's why some are looking to a grazing allotment like this one. We're still on U.S. Forest Service land. It's the Colville National Forest, but as you can see, it is much more open. And the hope is that both sides will agree this works better.
But we don't want to force the ranchers off.
Mike Peterson is the executive director of the Lands Council. I first met him last year to talk about the Colville A to Z project, where environmentalists and loggers came together to help prevent wildfires.
Do you consider yourself an environmentalist?
Absolutely.
Now he's hoping to help save Washington wolves by working with Washington cattle ranchers.
And you have found some great success on the forestry side, working with two different sides that originally the thought of coming together was unthinkable. Do you think you can recreate some of that success for the wolf issue?
I think so, but it takes a while. We'll follow the same pathway. You got to meet face to face. You got to build trust. You've got to find common ground.
For the Lands Council, that common ground might just be restoring the actual ground.
Ranchers need certainty. They have a place for their cattle in the summer months, and they need to have forage, and they would like some certainty that they're not getting munched on by wolves. This Recreate Meadows, Restore Meadows provides a pathway to that certainty.
There's more misinformation than there is good information.
That's where Chris Bachman comes in, the Lands Council Wildlife Program Director.
You know, the Smack Out Meadow is a great example of what we could actually have if we restored former meadows.
Smack Out Meadow is right in the heart of the Smack Out Wolfpack territory. It's part of a traditional U.S. Forest Service grazing allotment, but it offers something most other allotments don't.
You have a place here where you have cattle that you can see where they are. You can count them from a distance even. If there's any movement, in the tree line that's wolves coming in, you can see them and observe and protect your livestock.
It's why the Lands Council is now looking to duplicate meadows just like these all across the Colville National Forest.
A lot of the grazing allotments for U.S. Forest Service, and in the Colville specifically, look more like this.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason they look like this is that our forest has changed over the last 100 years. And it used to be more open.
So now they're poring over old maps and surveys to identify old meadows that are grown over now but could be transformed back into better grazing land for cattle. Often on many of the same grazing allotments ranchers are already using.
So if you could restore some of the meadows on their same allotments, do you think that that would make it easier for them to buy into the idea?
And I think that, yes, I think that's what we'll look for. Some of these allotments start at very low elevation and go way up to the peak of the Kettle Crest, for example. So there's a huge area. If it's a 50,000 acre allotment, say, could we restore 5,000 acres and the cattle have enough food right in that one area? I think that's possible.
When the state first established a wolf recovery plan in 2011, it outlined what to do when wolves attack cattle, including killing certain wolves if there are 3 attacks within 30 days or 4 in 10 months. But both Mike and Chris say the state's own actions are proof that plan isn't actually fixing the problem. He points just a few miles to the north where the entire Profanity Peak wolf pack was taken out in 2016. Today, a new pack has taken its place.
And we have the OPT pack where, again, they've removed 2 wolves, and my understanding is predations are continuing. Does incrementally removing wolves change pack behavior? You know, at this point, the evidence says no.
What about the people who are going to listen to what you're saying and say you're just another pro-wolf guy who doesn't get it?
Thank you for asking that, because while I believe wolves have their place on the planet and their place in the ecosystem, I come out in the middle. I mean, to me, it's not all about wolves. It's about a healthy environment, and wolves are part of that healthy environment.
But changing minds here will not be easy. Both Mike and Chris say they already know they won't convince every rancher to get on board, but they're confident they will get some.
It isn't working to have cows wandering through the thick forest and expecting them to survive. We got to do something different.
And they hope that will be enough to get started on a new way of raising cattle and protecting wolves in Ferry County.
What's best for everyone in this situation? I'm confident we'll get there. We'll find that answer.
So we're headed up outside of Colville now, so again, we can hear from both sides of this wolf debate. The question has always been, how do we protect Washington wolves? At the same time, how do we better protect our Washington cattle ranchers? So let's go see what we can find.
And all we are is out here trying to make a living. We don't want to move into town.
Ron Eslick is a lifelong cattle rancher in Ferry County.
There's all this fight with the environmentalists about getting rid of these wolves, the poor little cute little things that kills my cute little calf.
He believes wolves don't belong here in Northeast Washington, and he's tired of so-called environmentalists fighting to protect wolves, while he says small-time cattle operations like his are going extinct.
They don't know the situation. They don't know what's going on here.
There's more misinformation than there is good information.
So I went to find one of those environmentalists and met Chris Bachman, Wildlife Program Director at the Lands Council.
If what they were doing there was working, we wouldn't continually have the same problem year after year.
He prefers calling himself a conservationist and absolutely believes Washington wolves need to be protected even if they are causing conflict with ranchers.
Do I agree that if you are grazing in an area where we knowingly have wolves, should you be assuming risk? Yes. Is there room to actually collaborate and compromise? Yes.
And that search for compromise is why Chris agreed to meet with Ron.
I'm bringing both sides together. They have never met together face to face before, but they agreed to sit down here and talk with us today. We're going to go up and see if we can't find some kind of solution.
But to be honest, they were both a little hesitant when we finally came face to face.
Let's start out from the beginning. What was the objective of bringing wolves into this area? Was it to get all the ranchers off the range?
Well, I would start by saying that we're not opposed to the cattlemen. We're certainly, I mean, our goal is that you're not losing livestock as well. But I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding. Fish and Wildlife didn't bring wolves back in. It was a natural recolonization from Idaho and from British Columbia.
There are more than 120 confirmed wolves living in Washington today. By far, the most are living in and around Ferry County. But this map from Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife actually shows that same area has the least acceptance of wolves in the entire state. Just one more reason why these two sides have drifted farther and farther apart for years.
Don't believe everything you hear and half of what you see.
When we were here, you talked about the benefits of a place like this, as this historic meadow. Explain how this would work and how something like this could benefit someone like you, Ron.
So it's open. You see them herded, you see them bunched together in a natural defensive behavior. It doesn't mean that you're fixing all the problems. They had at least a 48-hour period where they had wolves in the tree line that were harassing cattle. But in the end, it actually was defensible space. There weren't cattle lost, there weren't wolves lost.
Would you be open to that idea?
It would not be possible where our range over there in the Kettle Crest, there's no openings like this. It's all timber.
What if they made one?
Oh boy. Nature made this one. It would be so much work and cost. It would be outrageous.
What do you say to that?
Could you do this over on, like in the western part of the forest? No, but could you create a meadow that was on the hillside? Yes.
You can try this stuff, but you know, a cattleman, if they don't get no calves in 1 year, 2 years, they're broke.
Would you be open to trying something?
Oh yeah, I would. Well, not me, because I'm getting too old for that kind of stuff anymore. But the younger cattlemen should be.
Having heard his frustrations, why are we fighting so hard to protect the wolves when it's very clear that they don't want them here?
Great question. And it's worth the fight for me because holistically, I recognize the benefit of having apex predators in ecosystems. I think it can be done.
Do you think it can be done?
It's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing worthwhile is, right? So
by the time they get it all taken care of, you might lose a lot of cattlemen.
In what way?
Well, they can't afford to go out and feed these wolves.
Would you say it's worth a try?
Well, anything's worth a try.
When we first got here, I think I sensed a little bit of apprehension from both of you, wondering how this was going to play out, what this was really going to be like. Talking to each other, do you think that there's some place somewhere in the middle that you guys can meet?
Yes, there is. And you know, you talk about these cattlemen, they're all environmentalists.
Yeah.
They take better care of the forest than what people think they do.
We're going to need to figure out and develop a trust between us that we want the same things. We want your cattle to stay alive.
It's a different approach from a conservationist, where most ranchers in the past have felt the push to get off of public land completely.
And we don't want to remove you from the land.
There's 2018 and some smart ass decided to bring wolves in, and that might do it, see? That's what I'm
That's how it
afraid
feels.
of.
Do you really think somebody brought wolves in here to Washington?
Yes.
And we could probably go back and forth on that one.
Oh yeah, we
day
can.
long,
There's
Do you both feel, though, that maybe you've inched a little bit closer to each other?
We're actually standing closer.
I see that.
I'm getting cold.
It's a good start, right? Body warmth, right?
I know establishing trust and having, I mean, that's the foundation of every relationship. And that doesn't come easy between our two communities, right? There's inherently distrust between our two communities.
There is.
So how do we circumvent that? And it's going to take a few special people to actually just say, you know what, let's try this.
Yeah, but I hate to be a punching bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And if you're feeling that way, how do we fix that?
Quit punching me.
But truly, we don't want him to feel like a punching bag, and we certainly don't want him to perceive that we're throwing the punches.
Over the years, law enforcement, ranchers, and many Eastern Washington lawmakers have tried to get the attention of state leaders in hopes of changing the rules or possibly even downgrading the wolf's protections as an endangered species. Nothing, though, has changed yet.
This will be all new.
Ron Eslick has been a livestock producer in Ferry County for decades. His family's been grazing cattle on the same land for almost 80 years.
I should be retired, but I like cows. You can go out and talk to them and they don't talk back.
I first talked to him last fall when he gave me an unprecedented look at his small family-run operation and the challenges wolves have brought over the last few years.
And that was all scuffed up there where she's fighting it off.
He personally lost another 3 cows to wolves in 2018. It cost him thousands of dollars off his bottom line. And as this winter will soon turn into another spring, he says he has no choice but to do things differently from now on.
Well, first off, I got to build a fence. Then we get them up here and then we can rotate the pastures and we can keep an eye on them.
Instead of sending them up to graze on his U.S. Forest Service allotment in May, he'll bring his 40 cows here to his son's pasture, completely enclosed and better protected. Did you ever think that you would have to do this?
No, never thought in my life.
They'll create 3 pastures here for easy rotation, and Ron's son will also be living just a few hundred yards away, ready to respond when, not if, the wolves try to move in. Is it going to be more expensive for you to do this in the spring?
Probably, yes.
Yeah. Worth it?
Oh, yeah.
What was the tipping point for you to finally decide that it wasn't worth it to just send them up on your allotment anymore?
Well, I'm afraid you go up there on horseback, you're going to be chased around by wolves. Then what's going to happen?
But there are still known wolf packs on every side of these pastures, with new tracks and sightings every single week. So even moving them here to a pasture isn't 100% fix?
No, it's not 100%. And if they keep getting hungry, then wolves are going to be eating everybody's cows right close to the house. I mean, they're coming in. They're not scared of you.
We've had an extremely difficult year. Right now is a time where we're reflecting on that and saying, okay, how can we change what we're doing so that we don't have this happen again?
Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife is responsible for managing wolf recovery in the state, but many have criticized the agency for putting everyone else's needs, including the wolves, over the ranchers. So is the expectation that the cattle ranchers make adjustments to having wolves in that area rather than trying to adjust the wolves' behavior?
All of the above. The expectation is to try to proactively, with non-lethal tools, influence wolf behavior. And so producers at least do 2 things from the non-lethal tools to try to prevent conflict.
But ranchers like Ron say they've been doing that for years, and the problem's only getting worse. After our story aired last year, he says several of his neighbors and colleagues then also wanted to share their experiences.
They need to do something to manage it.
And what was supposed to be a small meeting at the Kettle River Grange,
they're not going to leave,
became much bigger.
We've lost cattle every year since 2011.
Last night, I had a wolf come in the yard, almost got my dog.
And they're hanging on the mountain directly behind my house, so I'm kind of squeezed on all sides at the moment.
What does that mean for your daily life?
My grandkids don't get to walk outside on their own anymore.
Does it scare you that much?
Yeah, it does. When you can find tracks within 150 yards of your house.
Some of these landowners have been raising livestock for years, others just getting started, but all have the same concerns about wolves. What do you think the state could do to at least ease some of the struggle?
They've got to get a responsive lethal protocol. They need to move quickly. When we see issues building, this can't be something that lasts an entire grazing season.
They need to get rid of some of them.
Okay.
Because the numbers they're multiplying faster than, it's terrible. How can you just say that's okay? It's not okay.
In 2018, WDFW killed multiple wolves after repeated attacks on cattle, but these livestock producers say it's not enough.
The department is the one that has the ability to do something about it, and they're not doing it.
So what do they need to be doing?
Well, the first thing they could do, they're the ones that have the information of where the wolves are at. They know those wolves are there. They should be telling the ranchers.
I do believe there should be more collars on more of the wolves, which would help. But those collars also need to be set appropriately so the information we're getting isn't 4 days old, because by then it's no good.
And they agree communication with Fish and Wildlife isn't always easy. In fact, many no longer even report dead cattle because they say it's just not worth the trouble.
Pretty much, they want you to cater to the wolves, and you just can't do it.
They need to look at this region separately than the rest of the state.
The other side of the state is content to let the wolf sit here and eat our cows, and it's insulting.
So I took that sentiment back to Fish and Wildlife. Wolf policy lead Donnie Martorello says it's a balancing act that has to include the entire state.
Working with livestock producers, working with hunters and environmentalists and Department of Fish and Wildlife, and trying to put things in action to meet those needs.
You say that's a big order, and certainly it is. I think a lot of ranchers in this area would say you're not meeting their needs. What would you say to them?
I would say let's not give up now. Let's keep at it. We can do this.
But for ranchers all across Ferry County, something's got to give. But for them, there's simply nothing left.
We don't want to destroy all the wolves. We just want to make a living of our own.
The other challenge here in Northeast Washington is our proximity to neighboring Idaho and Canada, where the rules protecting wolves are very different. The wolves themselves cross the state and the international borders regularly.
Ron Eslick is just about ready to hang up his ranching hat.
How big do you want your operation to be?
Well, enough to eat.
What was a herd of 40 just 5 years ago has now been cut down to 11.
What made you downsize?
The wolves. I wasn't going to feed the wolves.
Wolf packs have been an ongoing challenge for his small family-run operation for years. We first met Ron in 2018 as he led us on a tour of the U.S. Forest Service grazing allotment behind his property. His family has held the rights there for decades.
So how long has your family been up here on this land?
Since 47.
He told us wolves weren't a problem, though, until the last decade. Since about 2010, though, he says he's lost cattle to wolves almost every year, a financial loss of tens of thousands of dollars.
What do you say to the people who say, what do you expect these wolves to do? Because we're out in their territory.
Well, what I say to them is they don't know the situation. They don't know what's going on here.
And what was going on then, he says, is still going on today. Far northeast Washington remains home to the vast majority of the state's 30 wolf packs, at least 132 known wolves in total. But just across the state line, in Idaho, there are even more wolves, an estimated 1,500, living under very different rules.
Those guys are fighting an uphill battle.
Liz Wood is another family-based cattle rancher outside of Bonners Ferry. She tells me it's never been an easy lifestyle, but living in Idaho does make it easier.
Our atmosphere in Boise, where a lot of our legislatures have an agricultural background, that makes Idaho pretty lucky.
Where hunting and trapping wolves is illegal in Washington, it's allowed in Idaho, and it's what ranchers all across the state say gives them a fighting chance to stay in business.
We actually love wildlife. That's why we have so much wildlife here.
Liz tells me in her decades of ranching, she's never lost a cow to wolves.
There's quite a few trappers and hunters around here, and I attribute our luck to them.
If they weren't allowed to be out here trapping, if they couldn't hunt, do you think you could have your operation as it is?
No. I'm not sure what we would do.
In Idaho, they listen to you pretty good because we're primarily a rural state. They understand the problem.
Mike Rapati also lives outside of Bonners Ferry, just a few miles from the Canadian border. He tells me ranching is no longer just about cows.
Is it getting harder to be a cattle rancher?
It's getting so you have to pay more attention to politics. You have to be involved.
And conservationists agree wolf management is more political than ever. When Idaho Governor Brad Little signed a bill last year allowing up to 90% of the state's wolf population to be killed, it drew a firestorm of criticism.
This is not about even hunting and trapping. It's truly about exterminating a population of animals.
Chris Bachman used to work for the Lands Council, but is now starting his own conservation group, hoping to take on what he calls a more holistic approach to wildlife preservation.
So it's very clear both states are kind of approaching wolf management very differently, but the wolf populations in both states are actually growing. What does that tell you as a conservationist?
Well, it tells me that the Endangered Species Act works, right? When you offer protections to animals and protect their habitat, they will recover.
Does that maybe place an unfair burden, though, since that is where many of these ranchers live and are trying to make a living?
Well, no, I don't think it's an unfair burden. I mean, we also have to look at the fact that these guys are subsidized grazing on public land, right? So the burden that is placed upon them by having a wolf population present is balanced by the fact that they're paying a penance to graze our public lands.
He also believes what happens to wolves in Idaho could soon have a direct and negative impact on ranchers in Washington.
We still have wolves coming in from Idaho that are feeding the wolf population in Northeast Washington. If you take that away, that source of wolves coming in, the number of wolves that are going to be there to move west, where we need to have them go, is decreasing.
In order for Washington to remove wolves from the endangered species list and lift some of the rules that protect them, pack numbers have to grow beyond Northeast Washington. The Department of Fish and Wildlife acknowledges the species is exceeding recovery goals in Northeast Washington, but the goal is to see consistent pack numbers in all 4 recovery regions of the state, and it can't happen if we keep killing them. But for ranchers like Eslick, it's no longer worth the fight.
I wish they would come out and see what actually is happening.
Right now, there are about 1,300 wolves in Idaho, and that is considered over carrying capacity for the state, Washington included, as well as Montana, Wyoming, and Oregon. Idaho Fish and Game says their plan is to get the wolf population down to about 500 statewide by 2028. So after all of that, it is clear this issue is far from over, and we will continue tracking this developing story with exclusive KREM 2 content you won't see anywhere else. Thank you for watching.